Joining us now is Maryland Congressman Jamie Raskin. He served as the lead impeachment manager at Donald Trump's second impeachment. He's a member of the January 6th investigation. Congressman Raskin, thank you for being here. It is good to see you again. I want to ask you, sir, about these audio tapes that have been released of Kevin McCarthy. They've dominated the news cycle. They've got potentially clear political implications, but that's not what you do. Your investigation is not about the politics of it. How do those tapes, those recordings, what Kevin McCarthy said after January 6th about and possibly to Donald Trump have an impact on your investigation?
Well, they're a vivid reminder of what was clear to everybody who was caught up in the violent insurrection and the attempted coup against Congress and against the constitutional order, which is that the president was deeply involved in these events. He was at the center of these events, and everyone believed at the time that there were constitutional crimes and statutory offenses committed. And I think people had the right sense at that moment that nothing like this had ever happened in American history before, and we had never had a president who had actually gone to the lengths of inciting a violent insurrection against the Union and attempting to overthrow our constitutional system. So Minority Leader McCarthy's words that were captured on that tape in a discussion with the Republican conference just reinforce everything we're finding, which is that this was an orchestrated, premeditated assault on our system of government. And we have, I think, what will be a very riveting story to tell America about how this came about, what were the causes behind it, and what we need to do to fortify our institutions in the future against coups and insurrections.
And that last sentence is really the reason why anybody should care about this, right? Because a lot of people make the argument that this is history. It might be an aberration. It's an anomaly. Donald Trump's an anomaly. But in fact, what we learned is that the institutions we have, strong though they are, we're not strong enough to prevent an attempted coup.
Yeah, I mean, this is a democracy, and in democracy, the people have the right to the truth about their own governing institutions. And we came very close to losing it all on that day. Had Mike Pence succumbed to the extraordinary pressure and coercion campaign being brought down upon him by Donald Trump and his lieutenants, what would have happened is Pence would have returned to sender dozens of electoral college votes, lowering Joe Biden's vote total from 306 to below 270 in the electoral college if he had followed Trump's orders and rejected Arizona and Georgia and Pennsylvania's electors. At that point, it would have shifted the whole election into the House of Representatives, where they understood we would be voting not by one member, one vote, but one state, one vote. And the GOP controlled 27 states. The Democrats have 22. Pennsylvania split down the middle, 9-9. So even had they lost the vote of Wyoming with Liz Cheney as the at-large representative, they still would have had 26 votes. They would have declared Donald Trump president for another 4 years. He likely would have followed the advice of Michael Flynn, his disgraced former national security advisor, who was urging him to invoke the Insurrection Act and declare martial law. And at that point, he would have called in the National Guard to put down the insurrectionary chaos he had unleashed against us. And so it was really only Mike Pence refusing to play ball with the president he had served in such an obsequious way for 4 years, and the valor and the heroism of the officers who stood between the members of Congress and the mob and the insurrectionists that saved us that day. And that's as close to fascism as I ever want to see America come to. And the people of the country need to understand how close we were to losing it all on that day.
And that picture you just drew would be bad enough on the face of it if this were just Donald Trump and maybe some people around him. But I want to ask you about, this becomes more important based on something you said during a panel event last night. You said that the committee, the January 6th committee, is going to present evidence that proves that there was coordination among then President Donald Trump and his inner circle and his supporters who attacked the Capitol on January 6th. Now, that's a big deal. Tell me a little more about that.
Well, there were two streams of activity, and one was designed to try to overthrow Biden's majority in the Electoral College. And, they used different tactics for that. First, they went to court, and more than 60 courts, including 8 judges who had been nominated to the federal bench by Donald Trump himself, rejected every claim of electoral fraud and corruption that the GOP advanced. And in a civilized democracy, that should have been the end of it. But they refused to take no from an answer from every federal and state judge that they brought their cases before. And at that point, they tried to browbeat and intimidate election officials, as they did infamously with Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger in Georgia. You'll recall he's the one that Trump said to just find me 11,781 votes, which was not Donald Trump trying to stop election fraud. That was Donald Trump trying to commit election fraud and being caught red-handed. They tried a bunch of other things, but it all came down eventually to January 6th, where they wanted Pence to declare unilateral, extra-constitutional, unlawful powers to consider and then nullify and reject electoral college votes, something no vice president had ever dreamed of asserting before in U.S. history, and something that all of the lawyers were telling Donald Trump he could not do. And you even had the Attorney General, William Barr, telling Donald Trump that his arguments were BS. Although he spelled it out. So it was very clear they were trying to perpetrate a fraud against the American people with their counterfeit electors, their lies about election fraud, which he knew were lies, and then their attempt to coerce Mike Pence and to mobilize this second stream of activity, which was insurrectionary mob violence, which left more than 150 of our officers with broken jaws and necks and vertebrae and ribs and arms and legs and traumatic brain injuries, concussions, post-traumatic stress syndrome. They stormed our doors. They shattered our windows. They shut down the counting of electoral college votes for the first time in American history. And so they interrupted the peaceful transfer of power, and they left the Capitol a bloody mess. Those two streams of activity came together. Donald Trump was being begged and beseeched by members of his own family, by members of his own administration, by members of Congress from both parties to call it off, and he refused to do that for more than 3 hours. He was absolutely AWOL because I believe, and this part is uncertain and we got to figure it out, but I believe he was trying to turn up the temperature on Mike Pence by continuing to unleash and then incite this mob against him. I mean, even when Donald Trump understood that Vice President Pence was in danger, even when there were mobs chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," he continued to send out messages inflaming the mob against Mike Pence. So it seems clear to me that he wanted to continue all the way to complete what they were calling the Green Bay sweep, which is what I'm calling a coup, because that's what the political scientists call it, a self-coup, when a president decides to attack the constitutional system in order to prolong his stay in office and set aside the electoral process.
Wow. Congressman, you said that the testimony is going to blow the roof off the House. We're looking forward to hearing more of this. Thank you for joining us, as always, tonight. Maryland Congressman Jamie Raskin is a member of the January 6th investigation. As always, sir, we thank you for your time.